And it's a super simple synthesizer. I just have the base default loaded up when you first load up the plugin, which sounds, it's not too loud, but a lot of fun. So we're gonna go through and kind of look at a couple of these different things, and talk about them, and try and make sense of all this. And it looks really scary at first. So we're gonna start here in these orange boxes that say OSC, which is for oscillator. And basically, synths use what's called oscillators to create sounds. And these different oscillators, this one has two of them, can use different wavelengths to create the different sounds, right? So oscillator 1 has what's called the sawtooth wave. Here it's this really jagged line. It has a square wave and a noise oscillator, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Oscillator 2, for whatever reason, I don't know why this one doesn't have as many, but oscillator 2 has the sawtooth, the square wave, a triangle wave, and a sine wave, and another noise oscillator as well. So what I'm going to do is, here we have the master controls. So here's the two volumes. I'm going to bring down the volume for oscillator 1. I'm going to bring up the volume for oscillator 2, and bring down the volume for oscillator 3, which is just the subwoofer oscillator, which sounds, which is way down there. But we don't want to deal with that right now. So I'm just going to bring up the volume for oscillator 2. Right now it's on a sawtooth wave, which has a bunch of frequencies. It's very grainy, and you're getting a lot of frequencies in there. As we move down, like to the square wave, we get less frequencies. Triangle wave, even less, but you still have that sort of extra frequency sound in there. And then the sine wave, which is just a straight tone at a single frequency. This is probably your most basic sound wave that you can use. And then noise is just all over the place, right? Like an old radio or an old TV, like TV static, right? So that's what that is. We're gonna stick with the sine wave for now. We can change the tuning of it in semitones. Bring this up. Right, so I'm just going to leave it as is. We can change the fine tuning, plus and minus 0.5 semitones. So if we wanted any, you can get like quarter tones and stuff in here, which is really interesting. And then this phaser, which we're not going to really deal with too much, but it changes the where the sound wave actually starts, whether it's like at the bottom of one of the waves, or at the top, or somewhere in between. We're not going to really deal with that. And then we're not going to deal with the FM as well. We don't really care about that. We're just going to worry about the sound itself. What you can do is then we're going to bring in a little bit of oscillator 1 as well. Right now, oscillator 1 is defaulted to minus 12 semitones, or an octave down. If we bring that up, Now we're unison. And it's playing as Sawtooth right now. So you can kind of mix and match what waveform you use. And the balance between the two. If I change the fine tuning of them just slightly off, then you kind of get this more chorusy effect. The closer in tuning that they are, the slower you can kind of hear these beats, which can sometimes be a fun thing to mess around with. There you go, now they're perfectly equal on each other. But I like using sine waves just because they're a lot easier to work with. Back over in the master section, you got portamento. It's actually turned off right now. Let's turn it on. Which is going to give you that sliding effect between your notes. Master volume here, we'll just leave it as is. Turn off the portamento. You can transpose it up octaves, up or down octaves. And this transposes the master sound, obviously, so it's going to affect everything else that you do, along with the tuning. And then there is a ring modulation here, which is a funky thing that I don't really want to deal with right now. It's starting getting more complicated. And then you can change the amount of voices that you want. Right now we're on mono, but if we change it to 2, or 6, then obviously you can play more voices that way. Okay, so that is the oscillators. It's what they do. I'm gonna go ahead and change it to 2 voices just. Or no, I'll change it to 6 just in case we want to play some actual chords. We're going to get to the LFOs in a second. Let's look at the filter here. And what this is going to do is it's going to change what frequencies pass through. So right now the cutoff frequency is all the way up. So all the filters are being allowed through. If we change the cutoff, then we lose those frequencies at that specific cutoff point. Now, sine waves are just a single frequency. So there's a single point where it's like off and on, right? If we change back to a sawtooth waves have a lot more frequencies all across the spectrum. Right, you can see that. So, as we change the filter cutoff, you can see over on the EQ that we're losing some of the top end as we go further down in the filter cutoff. If I were to add in the second oscillator, we would get more frequencies. That we can mess around with. This drop-down menu will tell you the kind of filter that you're using. So LP is using a low-pass filter, which is the same thing as this right here in Logic. This is your low-pass filter. It does the same thing. It just hard cuts those filters at this frequency. And this one is a 24 dB, so that changes the shape of it. If we go to an 18 dB, it would look, I don't know if this has an 18. Yep. 18, 12, 6. So different shapes on how steep the cutoff is going to be. Right, so let's turn that off. You also have high pass filters. Which at low cutoffs are the opposite ones. It's coming from the left side here. Just letting the high frequencies pass through. So at the top cutoff, that would be the same as this EQ band all the way over here. You have a BP is a band pass filter. So if you look at the filter here, I'm actually also going to turn on the sub so we get low frequencies as well. Basically what this does is it will filter out all frequencies on above and below the cutoff range at 12 dB, so it still has that kind of shape to it. It has a kind of like this shape to it, right? This is not a hard cut, but just so you can see the shape of it. So if we mess around with the cutoff here, we lose both high and low frequencies at the cutoff point. Notch filters will cut off just a single notch, something that looks kind of like this, and you sweep it around. Something super kind of skinny. So notch filters are good for taking out specific frequencies that you want, but they're not great at making a lot of shape in the sound. So, you know, it's fun to mess around with. You also have resonance, which is going to boost frequencies at the cutoff point. For example, it would be something like we have a low pass filter on, so it would be like this. This would be considered the resonance that boosts right at the cutoff point. Which gives you a pretty interesting sound. You can also change the ADSR envelope of the filter. So that's the attack, decay, sustain, and release of what you're filtering out. So when do you want, how quickly do you want the attack of the filter to come in? So let's move on to the amplification section. This is where you adjust the attack, decay, sustain, and release of the actual sound. So let's go back to a sine wave, turn off the sub. So attack is obviously going to change how quickly the sound starts. But a really high attack, it's going to take a long time for the sound to build up. Low attack is obviously going to happen instantly. Decay is talking about after the initial attack, how long does it take to go down to the sustain level? Because our sustain is at the maximum, decay is not really a factor. But if we take our sustain down and bring our decay up, then you can hear the sound after the initial attack kind of very slightly taper off. What is this? No, turn it off. There you go. You can kind of hear that pinging sound. Release will change how long after the sustain amount. How long does it take for the note to release once the key is released? So lots of different ways to shape the sound to how you want it. I never liked full 0 on the attack because you kind of get that clicky sort of sound. All right, let's talk about LFOs, or low frequency oscillator. Essentially, it's a sound wave, right? You can choose different sound waves at such a low frequency that you can't actually hear them. The human ear can't pick them up, but you can use them to manipulate the sound of your oscillators or your filters, or anything that you want it to. So if let's go to a sawtooth, and we're going to take LFO1. We're going to have a sine wave, that's fine. We're going to, from this drop down, we're going to change what we want the LFO to manipulate. If we change it to manipulate oscillator 2, then it will manipulate the tuning of oscillator 2. Right now we have no amount. We bring up our amount and bring up our rate, so how fast does it happen? Right, so a lot of these things can be very touchy, and you gotta be very careful about how much you are manipulating. Of course, there's a time and place for even the most extreme amounts. If we change our waveform, it's starting to sound like a British ambulance or something. This one's just like a randomizer. Right, so, and we can change this to manipulate different things, such as oscillator 1 and 2. If we wanted, we can have this one do oscillator 1. Oscillator 2, because it does not have an LFO affecting it, is still just that straight tone. If we come over to here to oscillator or LFO 2 and put this onto oscillator 2, now they're both being affected by different LFOs doing different rates, different amounts to their tuning. Right, so we can also change, let's turn this one off. We can change the LFO to affect the filter. So that's going to affect the cutoff filter right down here. And it will affect it starting at where the cutoff filter is, right? So if we have the cutoff filter down here, then it will start essentially doing this sort of thing, just like this. This is what it kind of looks like visually. If we bring the cutoff filter up, then it'll obviously, we would have to bring up our amount in order to cut off some of those lower ends. So it can be fun to get in some funky vibrato. And this is not really vibrato. This is more of a, I forget the term. If we wanted to do vibrato, we would change it to affect the tuning, but at a very small amount. And probably more of something like a anyway, so that's a lot of the basics on subtractive synths. You have a whole bunch of other controls that you can mess with. This is similar to an LFO, but it's a kind of, you can manipulate the shape of what happens. So and it gives you a little visual to follow along. So right now this is affecting oscillator 2's tuning. Change the amount that it affects it. You can change the speed here. If we turn it onto one shot, then it'll just do it once when the key is pressed. You can, of course, affect the filter with it. Turn one shot off. A little faster than that. Alright, so lots of different things to mess around with. You have two chorus options here. Which essentially doubles the sound and puts them in phase against each other so that you kind of get that kind of left-right sound thing that you can hear going on. You have a bit crusher here. Does not do much to sine waves. You get some interesting sounds in there. Of course, you have reverb. Size of the reverb, pre-delay, high cut and low cut, or high pass and low pass. Delays. The wet basically tells you how much delay is going to be in there. It's just going to keep going and going and going and going. And then the time that it takes. Don't think I liked that. You can sync it to any tempo of your project. And then, of course, more filters and feedback for the delay itself. But that is the TAL Noisemaker. There are some factory presets in here that you can play around with that obviously are much smarter than me and make interesting sounds. Like, let's use... I don't know, phasing saws. So essentially what's happening here is that you have your two oscillators both on sawtooths. You have, they're both pitched up an octave, and they're fine-tuned slightly apart from each other, as well as having the chorus on, so you get that really chorusy sound. Here's the balance of them. Over in the LFO, LFO2 is affecting the filter down here. So you can hear the cutoff frequency rise and fall. And then your amp here is your ADSR envelope. And a bunch of other filters going on, like delay and this little mountain thing going on that's also affecting the filter. So we got two things going into the filter. Subtractive synth. This is probably the most simple kind of synth there is, and I mean it is a lot. I'm still trying to learn it all.